Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and to the rural city of Wangaratta. Welcome to our council meeting today, the 28th of September 2021. I'll first begin by saying that the rural city of Wangaratta live stream that clause 91.4 of the Governance and Meeting Conduct Local Law provides the following. This public meeting is being recorded to improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be retained by Council in accordance with Council's legal obligations. As a visitor, on screen or in the public gallery, if it was open for that, your presence may be recorded. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which our meeting is run today, and including the Bangarang people. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and to the elders of other communities who may be with us today. Welcome. Will you all please stand for the opening prayer? Almighty God, we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council in its deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people on whom we serve. Amen. Thank you, councillors, for being here tonight. I'd just like to do a few introductions and a few apologies, or an apology. Our CEO, Brendan McGrath, is away on annual leave, has booked a numerous number of trips over the last 12 months and hasn't been able to get away and has cancelled them. So I'd like to introduce Sarah Brindley as our acting CEO, sitting on my right and to everybody's left. I'd also like to introduce Claire Barnes down the back to my right, or on the left of screen, and she is the Acting Director of Corporate Services here today. So thank you for attending, and thank you for your good work, Sarah, while in Brendan's absence. So I'd like to go firstly to, in our order of business, to item number 7, which is the confirmation of our minutes from our previous meeting, and I'll look towards Councillor Harvey Benton. Thank you, Councillor Benton. And a seconder, please. Councillor Dave Fuller. Does anybody like to talk on the minutes, or we're okay to run? Thank you. All those in favour of accepting there, the motion is now carried. Thank you. There are no conflicts of interest, so I'm going to move straight to reception of petitions. So we're going to move to item 9.1, which is request for a footpath along Scott Street and child-safe railing on the footbridge over the 3 Mile Creek. And I'll hand to Director Marcus Goonan. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This petition contained 108 signatures and has been received. The petitioner requests construction of footpath along Scott Street and installation of child-safe railing over the footbridge of 3 Mile Creek. The recommendation is that Council receive the petition and refer the petition to the Chief Executive Officer for a report at the next Council meeting.
Thank you. Director Goonan, can I have someone move that recommendation? Councillor Fitzpatrick, Councillor Grant. Councillor Fitzpatrick, you didn't need to talk on that. Councillor Grant? No. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to council reports. We'll move straight to item 13, officers' reports. I'll hand it over to Acting Director Claire Barnes of Corporate Services to introduce 13.1, financial statements and performance statements for the year ended 30th of June 2021. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. This report presents a 2020-2021 financial statements, performance statement and governance and management checklist. Council are required to prepare the financial statements and the performance statement as soon as possible after the end of financial year. These statements have been through an external audit process by Victorian Auditor General Office appointed auditors and have been reviewed by the Council's Audit and Risk Committee, who recommended Council certify the statements. Notable results within the financial statements include a $4.93 million accounting surplus, delivery of a $27.4 million capital works program, which included the completion of the railway precinct and 50-metre pool and upgrades to Wysack, revaluation of Council's infrastructure assets, land and land improvements, and ending liquidity of 173%. The performance statement contains the prescribed indicators and measures of service performance, outcomes, financial performance and sustainable capacity, and the results for each indicator, and will be included in the annual report. The governance and management checklist measures whether council has strong governance and management frameworks in place, covering community engagement, planning, monitoring, reporting and decision making. What we're seeking tonight, per the recommendation on the screen, is that council approve in principle the financial statements and performance statement, and authorise the Mayor and Deputy Mayor to certify the statements pending any changes recommended by, or agreed to by VARGO. Adopting and certifying the governance and management checklist is also recommended.
Thank you, Acting Director. Can I have someone move the recommendation, please? Councillor Herry and Councillor Grant. Councillor Herry, did you need to talk on this?
I will. Thank you, Mayor Rees. So upon review of these documents, I'm strongly confident that despite various challenges over the past year, they demonstrate the Council's finances and governance obligations are being well managed with probity and rigour. Thanks to the diligent work of the really good finance team that we've got with us. I'd just like to commend that team for their work in the preparation of these substantial documents, and must also extend the thanks to the Audit and Risk Committee, who have put in significant work into reviewing these documents ahead of providing their endorsement on the 21st of September. I see no grounds for withholding in principle support of these documents and forwarding them to the Auditor General as per the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herry. Councillor Grant.
Well, actually, I don't really have anything to say. I think Councillor Herry has said it all and said it well, and I certainly support and endorse his comments in seconding the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any other councillor need to talk? No. Councillor Herry, as you didn't need to finish off with anything, you're okay to move ahead? I'll put the recommendation to the vote of councillors. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Claire, item 13.2, Council Plan, Strategic Indicators and Project Update for Q4, April to June 2021.
Thank you. This report presents the 2020-2021 Q4 end of financial year results for the Council Plan projects and strategic indicators. Quarterly reporting on the strategic objectives, indicators and associated projects within the Council Plan allows progress against what is important to be measured and assists the community to understand the impact of what Council is doing. Highlights of the report include the completion of 30 projects and initiatives out of 37, with the remaining 7 in progress. The 30 completed projects include development of the Public Health and Wellbeing Plan, delivery of programs to support recovery from COVID-19 and the bushfires, Environmental Sustainability Strategy 2020 to 2025 Action Plan, Customer Experience Strategy Implementation, and the ICT Strategy Implementation, among many others. Several of the measures that were below target were impacted by the restrictions implemented by the state government to control the spread of COVID-19 throughout the financial year. As per the recommendation on the screen, we're seeking that Council note the report.
Thank you, Claire. Can I have someone move that recommendation? Councillor Fuller and a seconder. Councillor Herry. Councillor Fuller, would you like to talk? No. Councillor Herry, did you want to talk on this recommendation? No, you're okay. Any other councillor? No, thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Again, Claire, back to you at 13.3, which is the Audit and Risk Committee Biannual Audit and Risk Report and Annual Assessment.
Thank you. The Local Government Act 2020 requires that the Audit and Risk Committee prepare a biannual audit and risk report that describes the activities of the committee and includes its findings and recommendations. The Act also prescribes that the Audit and Risk Committee undertake an annual assessment of their performance against their charter. The biannual report was endorsed by the Audit and Risk Committee at their meeting on the 10th of August, and the annual assessment through an out-of-session resolution on the 14th of September, and it's now presented to Council for noting as per the recommendation on the screen.
Thank you, Claire. A mover, please. Councillor Bussell and Councillor Benton to second. Councillor Bussell, did you need to talk as a member of the Audit Committee?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. As a member of the Audit Committee, I commend the the council for the improvements they've made, particularly in the finance. And I want to pay special thanks to Manager of Finance Claire Barnes for the attention to detail since she's been here in this organisation. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Councillor Benton, did you want to say anything? No? Any other councillor? Councillor Herry, please.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Yeah, I'll just second Councillor Bussell's comments in congratulating Claire Barnes on the finances. But just a few words. So as per the report, we do have 8, I believe it's now 8 open risk items as identified by Vargo. However, all have had some actions performed against them as per the report, and a number of these items remain open merely pending the end of financial year and the completion of some other reporting obligations, particularly the financial statement, which is now endorsed. As per the management response, all items are being acted upon, and we should see a number of the items drop off the list come the end of year audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herry. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The recommendation is carried. Sorry, Councillor Bussell, for not going back to you to finish. Did you have anything further that you wanted to say?
I would have been very happy to repeat myself again about what a great job the finance team have been doing.
Great, thank you. Claire, thank you. 13.4, which is the draft procurement policy for public consultation. Please.
Thank you. This report presents Council's draft procurement policy for endorsement for public exhibition and feedback. The Local Government Act 2020 requires Council adopt a procurement policy that complies with the Act by December 2021. The draft policy includes tender or expression of interest thresholds and exemptions, description of the criteria to evaluate value for money, methods of approaching collaboration with other councils and public bodies in our approach to procurement, and outlines the process to be undertaken for inviting public tender or expressions of interest. The draft policy formalises economic prosperity, environmental sustainability and social value standards to be applied to evaluation criteria of tenders. As per the recommendation on the screen, we're seeking that Council endorse the policy for public exhibition and feedback until close of business on Friday, 29th of October. Feedback is welcome from local suppliers, and officers have planned an engagement process to guide local suppliers through how they can have success under the draft policy.
Thank you, Claire. Can I have a mover, please, for that? Councillor Benton and Councillor Grant. Councillor Benton, any words?
Yeah, I'd just like to probably point out to the public that in briefings and discussions within Council, Council has really highlighted some of the details in this document to be reflective of our local businesses in the area, to be make sure they're weighted in their index and a matrix in the going forward with procurement, which I think we've had much good discussion, or very good discussion about that area going forward, and I'm quite happy with the document as it sits at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I agree with Councillor Benton, but also to perhaps emphasise the fact that this is an important document because Council does want to do business with its locals, and this is a mechanism to encourage businesses to get on board, because every dollar that we spend locally, helps our community. So important document, and I certainly would welcome people making comment and being involved and being part of Council and the way Council does business.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any other councillor like to talk? Councillor Herry.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Yeah, as Councillor Grant and Councillor Benton have both mentioned, this document does include a 10% weighting for each the social and environmental outcomes, which is now clearly indicated in the guidelines, the guidelines being a document that sits behind this policy and provides a high level of detail for officers to deliver the policy. And on that issue of local procurement, I guess perhaps more importantly, this policy does outline measures to provide a framework of support around procurement to ensure local providers have a really good chance and equitable opportunity to engage in the procurement process. Government procurement and tendering can be complex processes, so I wholly support efforts to foster local services and businesses to ensure that they aren't put off by the hoops they need to jump through to engage in local government tenders and have a chance to put forward the best case for why we should engage them for the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Councillor Benton, nothing to finish off on? Nope. Thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Just before we move on to the next item, I'd just like to point out, as part of the audit committee that I have been on for over 2 years now, I'd like to also congratulate our finance department. Now, this is coming from the head or the chair of the audit committee, which is a lady by the name of Gail Lee, who also highly recommended that the financial reports, etc., that are presented to council for audit committee to observe and check are the best they've ever been in the last X amount of years that she's been on. So thank you, great job, guys, well done. So we'll move on now to item 14.1, and I'll hand over to Director Marcus Goonan for our road reseal tender.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. As part of the rural city of Wangaratta's asset maintenance program, council completes annual road resealing based on road condition data. The road resealing program consists of bitumen sealing of selected roads in both the urban and rural areas. This report is presented to council to award the annual road sealing program, and the recommendation is to award the contract, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to sign and disclose the contract price.
Thank you, Director. Can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Councillor Grant and Councillor Benton. Councillor Grant, anything to report? Nope. Councillor Benton? Nope. Happy with that. Any other councillor like to talk on the road reseal? No. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is approved. Thank you. And Marcus, would you like to, Director Goonan, would you like to announce the price, please?
Yes, that was $717,887.42, exclusive of GST.
Thank you. 14.2, which is our professional services panel. Thank you, Director Goonan.
So this contract is to seek the appointment of a panel of suitably qualified and experienced companies for the provision of consultancy services, including project management, design, architectural work, engineering, environmental, cultural heritage, surveying, and asset management. The report is presented to council, and the recommendation is that council awards the contract for the professional services panel and authorises the Chief Executive Officer to sign.
Thank you, Director. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Fuller and Councillor Fitzpatrick to second it. Councillor Fuller, any words? No. Councillor Fitzpatrick? Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? Okay, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you, Director Goonan. 14.3, which is C31522 for the Cell 6 construction at Bowser.
Yeah, Bowser landfill has 8 landfill cells. Currently 5 of these cells are full, and 1 cell is active. There are 2 cells remaining to be constructed. Cell 6, which this report pertains to, is one of those cells. As Cell 7 is now nearing being full, council is preparing for the construction of this new cell. The report is presented to council to award the contract for the construction of Cell 6 works. The recommendation is to award the contract to Winslow Contractors, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to sign and disclose the contract price.
Thank you, Director Goonan. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Herry and Councillor Benton. Councillor Herry, would you like to talk on the recommendation?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Rees. This project is, as outlined, because Cell 7, the current cell, is filling up. It did receive a fair bit of inflow from the 1920 bushfires that wasn't necessarily anticipated. So after the cell in question, Cell 6, is constructed, there will be only one landfill cell remaining at the Bowser site, which will be cell 5. It's just a good thing to keep in mind, I guess, that there isn't infinite space for landfill, and all our efforts at council with the green waste and recycling efforts, current and those coming in the future, are going to play an important role in maximising and extending the life of our landfill.
Good, thank you. And that was 2020, not 1920. I think, did you say 1920?
December 19.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, there you go. 1920, sorry. I was going to say you're 100 years behind. Sorry, any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? Nope. Nope. Good. Okay, we'll put the recommendation to the vote. So all those in favour, and the recommendation is carried. Thank you. Marcus, did you want to announce the price?
Yes, I can, Mayor Rees. It's $1,170,639.16, excluding GST.
Thank you, Marcus. We'll move on to 14.4, Director Goonan, which is Sport and Recreation Advisory Committee, please.
Sport and Recreation Advisory Committee provides advice to Council on matters pertaining to the strategic planning, support and advice together with the management of sport and recreation opportunities throughout the rural city of Wangaratta. This report is presented to Council to seek endorsement of the nominees for the community members to represent the Sports and Recreation Advisory Committee, where representatives are new or renominating upon expiry of their term. The recommendation is that Council appoints people from the received nominations as representatives of the Sports and Recreation Advisory Committee for a term of 3 years and advises the applicants of Council's decision.
Thank you, Director Goonan. Councillor Benton, for a change.
Thanks, Mayor Rees. Yes, I'd like to point out that this advisory committee had in excess of applicants to the positions available. I will move the motion, which I should have done, and I'll highlight there's a typographical area that appoints 2 people to receive the nominations of the representative on the Sports and Recreation Advisory Committee for a 3 years term ending September 24. I don't name them until
the end. That's right. Can I have a seconder in agreement with Councillor Benton's change of 3 to 2? Thank you, Councillor Grant.
Now I'd like to go back to what I was preempting or foreshadowing. That
Please
this
do.
advisory committee has had an excess, of which I think is something of a first in some places, to have an advisory committee with excess applicants to the positions available. The committee now has all full members on under its charter, and I think it gives some sort of credence to the ability of the community's interest in this area going forward, and the ability and the appetite that they've got to make sure that council is sort of in a position to be able to communicate back and forward, as though we keep getting told that we've got to have transparency and engagement. So I'll leave it at that at the moment until the motion is passed.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Grant, did you want to speak on the recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just would like to acknowledge the work of the Sport and Recreation Advisory Committee, as well as all of our advisory committees. I see them playing a very important role in providing advice to Council, interacting with Council on issues that matter to the community, and I'd like to also acknowledge the people that actually put up their hands and sit around the table and help to make these decisions. So and congratulate the prospective candidates on their nomination and appointment.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? Nope. Councillor Benton, you didn't want to finish off before we go back?
No,
Nope.
I don't think I have any more to say, thanks.
Thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour of accepting, and the recommendation is carried. I'll hand over to Councillor Benton to announce the names of the people on the committee.
Applicants that have been successful is Mick Wilson representing the AFL and Terry Bennett of the Millwall Cricket Club.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Director Goonan, thank you for your time tonight on those issues, so we'll now move on to item number 15, Development Services. I'm handing it over to Director Stephen Swart, and we've only got the one service there, or the one item, 15.1, which is planning application 21/0631570 Moyu Meadow Creek use and development of a cattle feedlot. Thank you, Director Swart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is about planning permit application for feedlot at 1570 Moyu Meadow Creek Road. The feedlot is relatively small compared to other feedlots in the municipality, with a proposed capacity of up to 212 standard cattle units. The proposal seeks to legitimize an existing cattle feedlot operating on the land and to provide changes to the existing operation to ensure that it complies with the Victorian Code for cattle feedlots. Notice of the application was given and 10 objections were received as a result, and the issues raised within those objections are detailed in the report and associated attachments, including the officer's assessment. The application was also referred to the appropriate authorities, and the Minister for Agriculture Victoria, and Goulburn Murray Water provided conditional consent to the proposal. The application has been assessed against the relevant parts of the Wangaratta planning scheme, and the officer's recommendation is that Council issue a notice of decision to grant a permit subject to conditions included in attachment 1 to the report.
Thank you, Director Swart. Can I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Oh, sorry, we do have a public question. Sorry. That's my issue there. Thank you. So as part of this, moving forward, before we put the recommendation up to hopefully get moved, there is a public question read at 15.1, and it's from Wendy Piccolo. Submitted a question: if the feedlot goes ahead and there is a breach in the retention/hold pond of the sediment basin and effluent, etc., and it gets into the Meadow Creek, who is liable and responsible for the cleanup and any disruption to any farming practices that occur along the creek? Will it be the owners or of the feedlot, council, or any other water authorities? I'll look to you, Stephen Swart, Director Swart, to answer a number of these questions moving forward.
Thank you. So if the permit is issued, the owners will be on the landowners to ensure that the operation is compliant with permit conditions and any other legislation.
Thank you. Another question from Wendy also asked, as the property is up for sale, if it sells, will the new owners be also governed by any decisions that are made in this application?
Thank you. The planning permit runs with the land and not with the owner. So that means if the land was sold, the permit and all the conditions in the permit would remain in effect. The new owner would have to adhere to the conditions of the permit.
Thank you. And lastly, Stephen Swart again, when he's also asked, is in this application there is a set number of cattle for the feedlot. Can this be increased with the boundaries of the permit, or does it need a new permit?
Thank you. The proposal has been based on there being up to 212 standard cattle units, and that number will feature in the endorsed plans and the supporting documents if a permit is issued. If the current or future landowner wanted to increase that number, they would need to apply to expand the operation, and that would be an application that would go through a similar process with advertising and referrals.
Thank you. Thank you for the responses. Thank you, Wendy. Great questions there. Appreciate them coming forth prior to council meeting. Thank you. So now I'll look for a mover. Councillor Bussell will move and Councillor Herry will second to get it onto the table. Councillor Bussell, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I look at all these applications on their merits very seriously. Interesting, last council meeting I was going against the planning department for a matter there, and this time I think the planning department's done a great job. So in a farm zone, I believe farming comes first, and farming comes in many, many forms. I would like to thank the staff that have worked on this application for, I think, over 12 months. It's been a long time, a long process, a very thorough process. I'd also like to thank all the objectors because their feedback is also very, very important in these processes. And I certainly don't discount the concerns that other people have. This is a very small feedlot in feedlot terms. We have other feedlots that are many thousands of cattle, and this one's 212 standard cattle units. And I really like to see farms that feed their animals well, and we have many, many, many very good farmers in the rural city of Wangaratta that supplementary feed their cattle, and I have no concerns with the parameters that have been put in by the planning department on this feedlot, and I have all confidence that it will be looked after and monitored by the council in future. And I urge all my councillors to vote with the recommendation. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bustle. Councillor Herry, would you like to talk as the seconder?
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Yeah, for a start, I just want to acknowledge that despite the site historically being the subject of some compliance action as a result of what turned out to be non-compliant feedlot activities conducted without a permit, it should be noted that such a historic compliance activity is not able to legitimately be introduced into the planning decision at hand. They are separate matters and must be dealt with as such. One pertains to the management of a non-permitted operation at a given time, and the matter at hand pertains to a permit, as Director Swart mentioned, on the lands that's attached to the land. I just believe that's an important distinction to make at the head of discussion. Similarly, it's clear there's a lot of infrastructure in place. There has been an existent operation. Somebody's put in a lot of time, effort and money, but equally that doesn't factor into a planning permit application decision. The proposed planning permit, along with its conditions, as outlined, are such that if they were in place historically, they would have avoided, almost certainly avoided the need for the recent compliance activity and would have reduced many of the concerns expressed in the objections to this planning application. I do believe that. It is indeed in a farming zone, and farming is an important activity to the area, to the rural city of Wangaratta. And as such, residential amenity isn't the primary concern. However, it's not completely overlooked in the Victorian Cattle Feedlot Code. And there are various measures, such as having restrictions on when the grain mill can run and having to clean manure from the holding pens, which are down closer to the road, and also requirements to clean up feed from around the troughs that are now going to be part of a formal permit if this is approved. So they'll also likely mitigate some of the amenity impact on nearby residences and nearby residents that have been experiencing potential negative amenity impacts for some time due to the aforementioned non-compliant operation. So there's also the construction and establishment of adequate controlled drainage area and associated effluent ponds, which are really critical when you're talking about a feedlot, especially one that's in a declared special water catchment area. So they're going to vastly improve environmental outcomes. So it's also important to note that if the planning application is approved, it will not be the end of oversight from the rural city of Wangaratta. So there's a lot of work that comes after such an application is approved, such as the future environmental management plan, which will drill down into some specific requirements to ensure that there are solid, sound operational procedures in place to protect the environment and ensure adherence to the code, along with some of those amenity impact mitigation measures. So I'm pretty confident the proposed conditions are adequate to largely address concerns raised by the objectors. And similar to Councillor Bustle, I definitely don't want to discount any of the concerns raised by objectors, but I do believe the conditions will mitigate them. And given the application with proposed conditions is to the satisfaction of the determining authorities, I'm inclined to support the officer's recommendation, pending further discussion, of course. Thank you.
Councillor Herry, wow. Thank you. Councillor Grant, did you have something to say?
Well, actually, yes, I have, and I will try to be brief. I'm actually, I'm going to support this recommendation. This is, after all, a farming zone, and this is farming activity, and as Councillor Bussell said, this is what we support. Considerable work, and I think this gives me great comfort in terms of how this planning application's been developed. There's been a huge amount of work that's been done by the planning team to ensure that this particular application is compliant in every way, mindful of its position in the catchment, in the water catchment. So, yes, permissible activity, and I think this is important to note, and the fact that there's been a lot of work done to ensure that this is going to work and work into the future, and I'm going to support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any other councillor would like to talk on the recommendation before I do? I'd just like to quickly note that, again, reiterating what Councillor Grant said, we are in a farming zone. It's development, it's jobs, it employs people. And as a great meat lover as well of Wagyu meat, that doesn't base my decision. But, however, this is great for Wangaratta. It's the continuation of a business on better terms, better outcomes, as Councillor Herry was saying. So it's good for our environmental impact. It's great for our community. It's great for our neighbours. I appreciate the questions of Wendy Piccolo. They're very they're perfect questions for the situation, and if the property is on the market and it does get sold, that the situation follows, as Stephen Swart did say in his replies, that it follows with the property. It doesn't go with the owner, it goes with the property, and they will have to be followed. So I too highly recommend this to support this project, and I'll hand back to Councillor Bussell to finish off as the mover. Thank you, Councillor Bussell.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. And one thing that the Rural City is noted for is fine food. And Moyu Wagyu produces very fine food. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? I'll state that the recommendation is carried 7-0. Thank you. We'll now move on to special committees. Thank you, Director Swart, for your input on that issue. Number 17.1 is the record of advisory committee reports. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. So this report is just a standing item so that minutes of advisory committee meetings are reported to councillors for information, and the recommendation is that council notes this report, which is namely the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzpatrick to move that recommendation, and a seconder, Councillor Herry. No conversations, councillors, all happy to move ahead. The recommendation to the vote, all those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no further 18-19, there is no notice of motions, there is no urgent business. There is public question time. There is one public question which I shall read, and I will get Director Goonan to reply. So this is from Brian Fox, submitted the following question. I sent a request to Council around about 12 months ago asking the Council develop a disposal policy along with the purchase policy that is now in place. At the time, I was informed by CEO Brendan McGrath that Council would move on with the purchase policy and the disposal policy would be a separate policy altogether, and could I expect some communication shortly? Around about 6 months later, I asked the same question re the disposal policy. I was told it is in the making. As of today, Saturday the 18th of September 2021, I believe nothing has happened, so I ask, if not, why not? Director Goonan.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. The CEO adopted the asset disposal policy in July 2021 under his delegation. This policy applies to all minor and major plant and equipment.
Thank you. So that answers Mr Fox's question. So obviously Mr Fox, Director Goonan, didn't review records to see that that policy had been adopted.
It was adopted by council, yes.
Correct.
Yep, by the CEO under delegation.
That's right. Thank you. Just wanted to point that out. Thank you. We'll now move on to confidential business. So, Councillor Fuller.
Mr Mayor, thank you. I move that the meeting be closed to the public to consider confidential items. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. We'll do that and we'll adjourn into the ovens room for this confidential item. Thank you.
Somebody has to second it.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Fuller, please.
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you. I move that the meeting be open to the public.
Can we have a seconder for that? Councillor Fitzpatrick. All those in favour? Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for that confidential item that we just stepped out of the room for. That brings an end to our meeting and our procedure tonight. I'd like to thank everybody for turning up. If you're online, thank you. To our directors, thank you. And our acting director and our acting CEO, thank you for a great job that you've been doing over the last almost couple of weeks. And we look forward to seeing you throughout the year, and stay safe and